In spite of dramatically increased spending on customer care initiatives and automated technology, research shows a continued increase in dissatisfaction and even rage among customers today. So how do you deal with difficult customers? Lisa Ford has some practical solutions to this challenge. Lisa Ford is a specialist in advising companies about how to best serve and retain customers. Her best-selling books and audio and video training programs are marketed worldwide. Listen as Lisa Ford explains how to deal with difficult customers.
How to deal with the difficult customer. Do you and those you work with ever face the challenge of a difficult customer? In this session, we're going to discuss two related skill areas. One is how to deal with the difficult customer, and the other area is how to listen more effectively. First, we'll look at strategies to handle the difficult customer, and then we'll move to listening skills. As you might guess, powerful listening skills are crucial to prevent a customer from becoming difficult. Now, I have to explain something to you. This is the time I have to admit to you, I love dealing with difficult customers. Now, I know that might be a little strange. I see your looks, but they give me a chance to solve their problem and win back their satisfaction. The alternative is they stop doing business with your organization. So I would rather hear the complaint and have the challenge of being able to turn them around. Think about your business for a moment. Why do customers become difficult? There are a lot of reasons, and I'm sure we could go on with quite a long list. There are four that come to mind. Number one, the customer did not get what was promised. The product or the service didn't work. Number two, somebody was rude. Number three, nobody went out of their way to provide service. They weren't courteous. They weren't pleasant. And number four, nobody listened. Regardless of the reason, here are some of the things that we know about staff and yourself when it comes to dealing with a difficult customer. Think about this for a moment. You are very good at dealing with customers when they're logical. Let me put something up here for a moment. You are very good in dealing with a customer when they are logical. It is so easy for you to give customers the reasons behind something we're explaining to them. You are very good at analyzing situations, giving them the facts. But I have to ask you, every so often you end up dealing with a customer who is not logical. They're frustrated. They're irritated. They find themselves emotional about something. Do you ever get customers in this state of mind? Now, here's my question to you. How well does a customer hear logic when they're emotional? They don't. We are not logical people. We are psycho. Now, you can take that any way you want, but we are psychological. And when we're dealing with someone who is emotional, we are wasting our time attempting to be logical when they're upset. Now, I want you for just a moment to put yourself on this side. Have you found yourself emotional at some time? Maybe when you've been the customer? Have you found yourself in a situation where possibly you've been in an argument and you have been thinking about the argument a half hour later? Have you done this? You may be driving home, you may be sitting at your desk, you're working out in the garden, you're doing something, but you're reviewing this argument. How many of you have said, half hour later, that's what I should have said? Have you noticed how the wonderful thing you could have said that would have worked comes to you, but it's a half hour too late? Well, the reason that happens is based on how our brains work when it comes to this stuff. The left hemisphere of our brain controls a lot of our ability to hear logic, to process reason. The right hemisphere of our brain controls more of our emotions, as well as our ability to be creative, to have intuition, a number of other things. Now, the reason I tell you this is, how does a customer fit in here? I want you to think for just a moment. When you're dealing with a customer and they're over here, what happens to their ability to speak, their verbal skills? What do you hear a customer doing? Here they are upset, they're emotional, frustrated. What do you hear with their verbal skills? Frustration. What else do you hear? How do they speak? Loud. Exactly. And sometimes they stutter, they stammer. It's like the words don't come out in the right order. And when some customers are extremely difficult, have you ever had a customer use language you'd rather not hear? It might fall into the category of foul language. For some reason, we're not quite sure why, but foul language is the only language for most of us that has ended up on this side of the brain. So our normal verbal skills are all on this side, but when we find ourselves emotional for a brief period of time, we cannot hear logic. That's why I want you, in dealing with a difficult customer, to always deal with the emotions first and then bring the customer over to the logical side. Acknowledge the emotions and then use the process that we're going to discuss in just a moment to move them over to the logical side. I have to ask you, have you ever dealt with someone who was so difficult, so frustrated, that they had the ability to drag you or your staff member from the logical side to the psycho side? So not only is the customer difficult, you're getting a little difficult with them at the same time. So that's why we need this 7-step process. The first step to deal with a difficult customer is, number 1, remain calm yourself. Yeah, I heard you. Some of you laugh like that's easier said than done. You're exactly right. I will give you 2 strategies to help you deal with this. The first one is, learn your body's early warning signals. Learn your body's early warning signals. See, luckily, before we really get upset, all of our bodies let us know we're getting there. Okay? I will go ahead and tell you my early warning signal. It's this. I clench my jaw. Now, what are some that you think of that you do? Other early warning signals. Fist clencher. Okay, what else? Yes, your breathing changes a bit, which then sometimes can affect how I start to sound. Other early warning signals?
Shakiness.
Yes, you get a little shaky. Others might get a little sweaty. Okay? I bet a few of you start to feel a little tension and tightness up in the neck and the shoulders. So learn your signal, and here's what you do. By knowing it, you now can do the opposite of it. And that can keep you calm. So for me, if I clench my jaw, one of the easiest things I can do is simply unclench my jaw. If I'm a fist clencher, I can simply unclench the fist. If I start to feel a little sweaty, I can wipe the palms off by possibly putting a hand in a pocket or behind my back. Many of these things we can do so easily because we have contact with the customer over the telephone. So we can do the opposite and no one knows we're doing the opposite. But if I'm face to face, I've got to be a little more subtle about it. Now, some of you may be thinking, I don't know what my early warning signal is. If you don't know what it is, ask people who know you very well. They know. Someone you work with. Oh, especially children. Children always know what you do. So go home and say, honey, before I really get mad, what's the first thing I do? And they'll say, oh, Mama, your eyes get real little. Or they'll say, oh, Daddy, it looks like your heart's moved up here and it's going to pop out of your head. I mean, they know exactly what you do. Learn your signal, do the opposite, and then practice the technique. Now, that's one way to stay calm. Another way to stay calm is listen to your self-talk, your internal dialogue. See, I believe when we face a difficult customer, we usually say things to ourselves such as, who do they think they are? I don't have to sit here and listen to this kind of stuff. I'm not getting paid enough to have to take this. So the more I say that to myself, what am I doing? I'm getting myself worked up. So listen to what you say to yourself and change what you say. So learn your signals, then do the opposite, or change your self-talk. Those two steps will help you remain calm and keep yourself from going to the psycho side. That's the first step. Number 2, to calm down the difficult customer, you know this one, is let the customer vent. Let them vent. And don't interrupt. That is a strong rule of thumb. Don't interrupt. Here's what I want to ask you. Have you ever dealt with a customer who was so angry that they memorized what they were going to say before they called you to say it? And let's say you interrupt them. What do? Start over. They only have it memorized from the beginning, so they've got to start over. And don't interrupt. Oh, this is very hard for you. Because halfway through the venting process, in some situations, you know the answer. You know what you're going to tell them, and when you tell them, they're going to be happy. Even though you're ready to tell them the answer, they are not ready to listen to it and hear it. So interrupting only prolongs the conversation. Let them vent. Don't interrupt. You'll know when the customer is finished venting. They sound like this. You ever heard that before? It's like, or they say, well, what are you going to do about this now? So now it's your turn. After they vented, deal with the emotions. Some of you are thinking, but wait a minute, they vented, they're finished. Well, you can't be sure they're really finished until you've acknowledged the emotions. The third step is restate. Third step is restate the customer's emotions. Restate what they just vented about. Or, number 4 step, find agreement. And if there's nothing you can agree with, accept their point of view. 4th step, find agreement or accept their point of view. When you think about it, that simply is helping you get on the same side as that customer. And the 5th step, which also helps you deal with and acknowledge the emotions, is show empathy. Here's an example of restating and finding agreement. I was listening in on a phone call one day at a very large international utility company. And I heard the representative answer the phone, very bright. She answered, great tone of voice, named her company, identified herself, and the customer let loose. And the customer said, you all are nothing but a bunch of rip-offs. This is the highest bill we've ever received. It's outrageous. And there's no way that it could be right because the meter reader never even gets out of the truck to read the meter. She was finished. Now it was time for the representative from the utility company to respond. Here's what she said. Said, so you're concerned because this is the highest bill you've ever received? Do you hear that? Restating. Then the customer said, you're right. Still not happy. And the representative said, I'd be calling too if it's the highest bill we had ever received. Did you hear that? Finding agreement. Notice how she used finding agreement. She said, I'd be calling too if it's the highest bill we'd ever received. She did not find agreement inappropriately. And this is where I believe we need guidelines, and your team needs guidelines, because they need to realize we can agree, but we've got to do it appropriately. Such as, she could have really messed this up and agreed with another part of that statement, like, you're right, we are ripping you off. and that wouldn't have worked, as we well know. So we've got to make certain we're using those skills very appropriately. She did restating, check the mood of the customer. Was she really finished venting? She wasn't. She said in a very strong voice, you're right. She found agreement. Then the customer was ready to move on to logic. I want you to notice, though, how easy it is for us. It is so much more common for us to want to go straight to logic. Because when the customer is venting, the minute they finish venting, we usually want to say, what's that order number? What was the shipment date on that? Will you give me that invoice? So we are so quick to want to go for the facts, the logic. And the customer instead wants us to acknowledge the emotions. Does that make sense? So after they vent, restate, find agreement, show empathy. All three help you acknowledge the emotions, and I will say there are many times you will need to use all three of those. You'll restate, then you'll try empathy, and then you'll have to go back and find agreement because the customer is still not calm. So learn from that example. The woman at the utility company, she did a great job at dealing with the emotions first, and that at any point in the process, when the customer's calm, then you can move on to the logical side once you've determined the customer is ready for logic. Before we move to the sixth step, let's work through certain words not to use when dealing with a customer, especially ones who are difficult. Now, I would say avoid these words all the time, but especially ones who are difficult. These are what I call emotional trigger words. There are certain words that the minute you use them, it just triggers an emotional response in the customer. The last thing we want. Let me walk you through some of these. The word can't. Can't is an emotional trigger word. The minute the customer hears what you can't do, that usually sets them off. They only want to know what you can do. The word no or I don't know. They want to hear what you can do for them, what you do know. Even if the answer is no, they want to hear, well, is there an alternative? If the answer is I don't know, well, what are you going to do to get the information? And that's exactly what our customers want. Oh, another word avoid using is the word policy. Have you noticed customers don't like to hear policy? They always want to talk to somebody who can change the policy for them. Now, somebody think, wait a minute, Lisa, sometimes I have to quote policy. Just don't call it policy. Instead, say to the customer, oh, here's how we're going to handle this. And then quote policy word for word. Oh, here's what we do on this. And quote policy. Just simply don't call it that. A few other emotional trigger words. Avoid the phrase, you should have, or why didn't you? Those only place blame on the customer, and it keeps you from moving forward into problem solving. Other phrases saying, well, the only thing we can do here is. Instead say, oh, I think the best option is. See, many of those words will typically only worsen the situation. Oh, the worst one is this. At some weak moment, have you ever said to a customer, now just calm down? Didn't work, did it? And it was a weak moment. Brainstorm other emotional trigger words with your team and help everyone listen for those words and work to avoid using them. At this point, we've covered 5 steps to deal with the difficult customer. Let's say you've done all those and you've done them very well. You've stayed calm. You let the customer vent. You dealt with the emotions, and the customer is still difficult. you have them every so often. What now? The sixth step is gently confront. This is not an easy skill to use, but I want you to take notes so you can teach it to those you work with. Here's how it sounds. Use the customer's name. Usually you have the customer's name. Use it. Mr. Miller, I really want to help you. As long as you continue to yell, I am finding it difficult. I can look into this for you. Will you let me? Do you hear that? Let me do one more of them. Mrs. Young, I really want to help you. As long as you continue to use this language, I am finding it difficult. I can see if we can get this resolved for you. Will you let me? Let's take that apart for a moment. Notice you use the customer's name. There is something about using the customer's name that helps diffuse it a bit. Okay, it nearly catches their attention. Then, I really want to help you. Here, help is in your tone of voice. This next statement is up to you. I am finding it difficult when you use this language. Fill in the blank. Okay, Mr. Miller, I really want to help you. When you use this language, I find it difficult. When you continue to yell, I am finding it difficult. So fill in the blank with whatever the behavior is, then explain the situation such as, I can fix this, I can look into this, I can get this resolved. Whatever's appropriate based on the situation. This last question is very important. Will you let me? It's difficult for somebody to say, no. They need something. They need you. If you've used a similar technique to this, have you ever had the customer at about this point nearly apologize? They sometimes don't really apologize, but it sounds like this. I know it's not you personally, but just every time I have to deal with you people. You notice what they're doing. They're pretty much saying, okay, I'm finished. Let's move on. And at that point, you can then move to logic. And if that does not work, move to the seventh step, which is delay this or transfer the customer to a second person. Delay or transfer. Now, if I delay, then I need to get back as promised. And if I have given it to the second person, now many of you are thinking, wait a minute, I am that second person. You're the one who gets the difficult customer. You're the one who gets the transferred tough customer. Have you ever noticed when they get to you, what frame of mind are they in? They're nice. They're now calm. Why is this difficult customer who was very difficult with the first employee, why are they now nice with you? They got vented. Time. They're done. And now they're ready for action when it comes to you. So do me a favor. Go back to the first individual who sent you this difficult customer and say, thank you. Because you took the hard part. They were easy for me. They got vented on you. They were nice with me. Thank you. That certainly can help our teamwork. I believe we need to see our difficult customers as a challenge. And some of you do love difficult customers. You're like me. You think they are a bit fun because it gives you a chance to see how good you really are. There's a great quote from an author named Rita Mae Brown. She says this, people are like tea bags. You never know how strong they are until they're in hot water. Well, with difficult customers, you're in plenty of hot water, and you get a chance to test your strength on a regular basis. Let's now turn our attention to listening skills. Listening is the foundation of effective communication. For example, if I have a difficult customer and did not listen very well, then I will be unable to use the 7-step process that we just discussed. I would not appropriately restate or show empathy effectively or find agreement sincerely. I won't even hear the real reason for their anger. And as you know, listening is needed in many other situations, such as handling the simplest transaction, filling an order, to handling a technical question, to responding to employees' concerns at a meeting. So keep your everyday encounters in mind as we talk about listening skills. Everyone wants to know they've been heard, especially customers and those that you work with. Listening is such a powerful skill because it shows respect. It shows that you really do understand what the person has just said and you care. To me, it's amazing what you can do with such a simple skill. Here's what's interesting. We all know it's a very simple skill, but it's not an easy skill to use every single day. We have to work at it. And I think that's why we need to be reminded of some of the strategies that we want to talk about. To be the best at listening, let's go through these 4 steps of how to improve how you listen. The first one, be ready to listen. Be ready to focus on that customer, that individual within your organization at that moment, at that time, which means block out all that internal noise, external noise, the visual, the side conversations, that chatter that's going on inside your head. Clear your head, be ready to listen, and focus. The second step, take notes. Take notes, that simply makes you a better listener. You track what the customer is saying, what this individual is saying as you're listening, and it really keeps you focused. It also helps your memory at that point, and it helps you separate customers. As you know, sometimes they start to sound a lot alike. You've dealt with 14 that day. I would also recommend you say to the customer, especially when dealing with the customer on the phone, I am concerned about this, I'm writing it down. When you say I'm writing it down, I find your customer now feels taken seriously and they're less likely to repeat themselves. See, when they don't think they're being heard, they keep saying the same thing over and over. And if you say I'm writing this down, they help you. They even say things like, well, the second thing is, the third thing is, they start numbering them for you. That's great. And the third step, show you are listening. There are 2 ways to do this, attentive silence and attentive words. Many of you are doing the first one right now, the attentive silence. The eye contact, the head nods, the posture, the position, showing you're with me, you're listening. Now, if you're on the phone and you only do attentive silence, what will the caller say? Are you there? Hello? Are you listening? So you've got to go to attentive words, which are, yes, oh, I see, certainly. Simply let them know you are listening. And the fourth step, restate. To be an effective listener, you must restate to show you're involved in the conversation. You can restate either content or emotions. Now notice it's called restating, not repeating. And you can partially restate what the person has said. You don't have to restate everything they just said. And by partially restating, you take control of the conversation. The 4 steps of listening will help you communicate more clearly and respectfully. While listening, do something that's also called listening around the edges. Because sometimes people mean things that they don't really say, but they say it through their tone of voice and through their body language. And there'll be less chance for miscommunication if you really listen for the feeling, the emotion, the frustration, the anger, the excitement. So listen around the edges. There's an old saying, it's my favorite, that says this: there's a difference between listening and waiting for your turn to talk. Make sense? Which is your habit? Especially with customers. Customers don't say that many new things. So they get 8 words out and you pretty much know what the next 42 will be. And you start tuning out. I want you to truly listen and not just wait for your turn to talk. Listening is the most powerful tool in the world of management and customer service. When employees are great at listening, they will be great with the customer. But as we discussed, sometimes the customer can be difficult, and we all need special skills to handle them. The 7-step process is a proven way to calm down the customer and create a more satisfied one. Remember, a complaining customer is a good thing because you are given the chance to hear their problem and move forward to solving it.